Buried beneath layers of muskeg and forest in Alberta, Canada, lie 140 square kilometers of tar sand. These regions, also known as the oil sands, are huge deposits of bitumen, a tar-like substance that is turned into oil through a complex and energy-intensive process that causes widespread environmental damage. Extracting it pollutes the Athabasca River, laces air and water with toxins, and often results in farmland being converted into wasteland. And that's not all. Titled as the world's largest and most destructive industrial project on Earth, mining the tar sands contributes to the rising emissions of greenhouse gases, requires vast areas of boreal forest to be clear-cut, and also creates tailing ponds, man-made lakes filled with large volumes of toxic water. With an extensive list of environmental impacts, it's no surprise that this massive energy project has caused a lot of concern in environmental circles around the planet. Though the last time we heard any updates or significant protests about the tar sands was in 2015. So I decided to investigate what happened to the tar sands and why have we stopped talking about them. Throughout 2006 to 2015, the tar sands were the focus of environmental movements around the globe. Greenpeace Canada, Treaty Alliance, and Environmental Defense are examples of some of the organizations that actively fought against the tar sands. Even celebrities such as Leonardo DiCaprio had opinions to share on the matter. Called on governments and energy corporations to create policies to regulate their carbon emissions and reduce their environmental footprints. But strangely, at the end of 2015, all of their activities sort of just stopped. The last public statement that Leonardo DiCaprio made about the matter was in 2015. The same year that Greenpeace Canada stopped explicitly reporting on the impacts of the tar sand. So you would think there must have been a solution to their environmental concerns to get them all to just come to an abrupt end. Did the risks of the oil extraction all of a sudden get better? In order to figure out exactly what happened to the discussions about the tar sands, I did what any other good child of the internet would do, and I found two potential reasons why. The first reason, Alberta's climate change policy. In November 2015, the government of Alberta announced a sweeping new climate change strategy that, if implemented, would include a cap on climate pollution from the tar sands and put a price on carbon emissions. They proposed that by 2030, they would limit the annual greenhouse gas emissions produced from the oil sands to 100 megatons per year. And if any company were to exceed that cap, they would have to pay a penalty of $200 per ton. As this plan marked one of the first government addresses to solve the environmental concerns of the oil extraction and put a hard cap on the tar sand emissions, it gave people a reason to ease back their protests. An author from Greenpeace Canada even wrote that when Alberta announced the climate change strategy, he breathed a sigh of relief that the days of endless expansion of the tar sands were over. So I figured that since Alberta released their plan in 2015, 3 years ago, I would be able to analyze the success of their plan. But what I found instead was shocking and disappointing. Not only has the provincial government yet to implement the policy into a law with set regulations, but according to third-party reports, they're still in the process of monitoring their emissions and developing specific targets. And without thorough targets and forecasts, I couldn't exactly determine whether or not they have reduced their greenhouse gas emissions. And yet, while there lacks significant evidence about the success of Alberta's cap, it already has seemingly had an effect, but not in the way that environmentalists were expecting. In order to explain what I mean, I need to address the second reason I found for why people have stopped talking about the tar sands. Our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. As many of you are probably aware, in October 2015, Canada had their 42nd federal election where Justin Trudeau and his Liberal Party won majority of the seats. Unlike his competitor, Stephen Harper, Justin vowed to take a more active approach to addressing the environment and reducing carbon pollution.
You haven't been able to get it done on the environment, Mr. Harper. You haven't been able to get it done on the economy. You haven't built the kind of balance that Canadians expect. If we're going to build strong communities, if we're going to create jobs for our children and grandchildren while protecting our air, our water, our land, we have to actually show leadership.
He even made climate change one of his main platforms, as he established a pan-Canadian framework for combating change within his first 90 days and stated over and over that the environment and the economy had to go hand in hand. People became optimistic that Justin Trudeau was the solution to their environmental concerns. But what I found was he sort of has had the opposite effect. Rather than significantly promoting the environment, he's approved 2 new pipelines and use Alberta's emission cap for the rationale for why they made sense within its climate stance policy.
We have to get off fossil fuels eventually. We have to do that. We cannot do that right now. We have to manage a transition, and that's why I have approved pipelines that the previous government wasn't able to do.
Sadly, his push for the pipelines will likely increase tar sand pollution as they require more bitumen to be extracted and processed through the pipes. And not to mention, there's a ton of environmental risks associated with pipeline spills and ruptures. So the answer I came to for the question of what happened to the tar sands is almost nothing. In fact, they currently are equally as destructive, if not worse. With the proposed pipelines by Justin Trudeau and the lack of legislation in Alberta, we've been misled into believing that our environmental concerns have been addressed. But perhaps this doesn't have to be the end to the discussions about the tar sands. Start talking about them. Start fighting for them. And let's not stop until we put an end to the world's largest and most destructive industrial project on the earth.